the minefields of Kosovo, where she's been living and working for the last several months. So, hi Amy.
Hi Deborah.
I'm glad you made it here today.
Well, it's very nice to be here.
So could you tell us what you were doing in Kosovo and Macedonia and Hungary over the last several months?
Well, actually, back a couple years ago, I started working for the University of Maryland in Bosnia. I was teaching soldiers on the military bases there. And then I ended up working for a company doing training. And this was for a company that was building all the military bases over in that region. And most recently, I was the photographer.
And now you're here in Sedona, living with me, looking for work. Well, what we wanted to do today was talk to you about some of our early childhood psychic experiences we had together. I think as twins, we were especially tuned in together, and so we had all kinds of different telepathic experiences. And this really helped us to get an interest in psychic phenomenon and really helped prepare us for where we are today in our lives. So why don't we start off, should we tell them about our dream we had that one time?
Sure.
Okay. Well, when we were in college, our first year of college at Southern Illinois University, we were sharing a dorm room. And one night, I had been out fairly late at night, and I had an experience that was kind of unpleasant. And I came back to our room. I was rather upset. And I bring that up because a lot of times when spontaneous psychic experiences happen, they'll happen because there's a lot of emotion going on. And so anyway, I got back to our dorm room, and I noticed that Amy was lying in bed and she was asleep, but she was having a dream. She was tossing and turning and making a lot of noise, and I could tell she was having what we call paralysis dreams, where you cannot wake up out of the dream, and it's usually a very scary dream. So I was just about to wake her up when, I don't know why I thought of this, but I thought, hey, why don't I try to contact her psychically or telepathically? So I just stood over her bed, I closed my eyes and concentrated really hard, and I said, Amy, if you can hear me, then raise your hand, and that will help you wake up. I said this in my mind. I never spoke the words out loud. I just said this in my mind. And I watched her. I watched her for about 2 minutes, and absolutely nothing happened. And I thought, oh, that was really brilliant and a waste of time, and I just laid down in bed.
Well, what was happening with me was I was having one of my paralysis dreams where I was conscious that I was dreaming, but I couldn't get out of it because I couldn't move. And I thought the only way that I'm going to be able to get out of this is if I move. So I'm lying there feeling completely paralyzed. All of a sudden, my left hand started to raise. And when I saw that in my dream, that triggered me to wake up. Well, when I woke up, I saw Debra standing a couple feet away from the bed looking at me. And I'm like, what are you doing?
And at that point, when she described what happened, or no, actually, I told you what I was doing and had been trying to do, and then you told me what you had actually experienced in the dream. So no, she hadn't actually physically lifted up her hand like I thought she would, but in her dream she had lifted up her hand. So obviously there's really no way that that could have just been a coincidence, since there were such specifics to it. So that really made us stop and think. And remember, we slept with the lights on for the rest of the night because we were kind of freaked out about it. Also, when we were younger, I think we were about 4 or 5 years old, there used to be some kind of entity or ghost that would stand in the doorway of my parents' bedroom. And every single morning I would get up. I used to like to run into their bedroom and hop on the bed, but the problem was that there was this thing standing in their doorway. It was not just my imagination, it was definitely there. It was in the outline of a man. It was filled in with like black and white snow like you'd see on a TV screen. And it was something I was very fearful of. So I would just stand there and I would just close my eyes, count to 3, and just run through it really fast. And once I ran through it, it would disappear. Well, I don't think we really discussed this, but years later, one day Amy started talking, and you can tell them what you told me.
Yeah, I know we never did discuss this because it was something that was just so much a part of our life. This happened every morning. We would wake up, we'd want to run into my mother's room, but there was something in the hallway. Now, I never physically saw anything. It was just a sense that there was something very negative and very scary in the hallway. And in order to get from our bedroom to our mother's room, we had to just run as fast as we could past this. And it was interesting that we never discussed it with each other.
But it's just, I think that's what happens a lot of times with children when they see spirits or ghosts or have different psychic experiences. No one at that age tells you that that's out of the ordinary, so it's just something that you deal with.
And this is something we were talking about the other day that I think it's important to bring up, that oftentimes when people ask us about our psychic experiences, they're asking about these big, gigantic, enormous things that might happen, you know, seeing ghosts or having huge visions. And these are the things that are most obvious, but really we have always had psychic experiences, but not that extreme type. It's really been much more subtle.
People used to always ask us the question, well, if one of you feels pain, does the other? And we actually thought that was a really stupid question, but now years later, after we've had a lot of different psychic training, what we've realized is that, well, first of all, this is something that happens with everyone. All of us share each other's thoughts and feelings and pain. It's just so many times people aren't aware of it. It's so subtle. It's just like if you're married to someone, maybe you start feeling depressed, or maybe one day you start feeling really angry or anxious. Well, a lot of times that might not even be your own emotions. You're picking up the emotions of your husband, but you just don't know it because you just feel it as your own. And people feel things like that. Some people feel them more so than others. For us, since we've always been together and the boundaries between us are not very thick, we've just always had that, and we just didn't really realize it. But now it's like with Amy's been living with me for just about a week, and sometimes it's really tough because if she's feeling anxious about something, suddenly I'll be feeling anxious. And hopefully we've learned enough, well, supposedly we've learned enough psychic tools like grounding and different protection devices for that not to happen. But I think because this is something that's been going on for so long, it's really hard to keep from happening.
Mm-hmm. And also, since both of us have been doing different types of spiritual work where we'll do meditations and we're releasing different types of energy, when she releases something, oftentimes I'm feeling it in the part of my body that she's releasing it. And we started to discover that we were having this experience. It was just within the last couple years.
Right. What happened, sometimes I would just be sitting at home and everything would be going great, and suddenly I would feel this anxiety, and it was just like waves of anxiety coming through me. And after I'd had enough psychic training, because there's many schools all over the country and many in California where they teach you not only how to develop your abilities to the point where you can do readings as well as the most gifted psychics out there, but they teach you how to recognize these things. And finally, one day when I just felt these waves of anxiety, I started asking, okay, this does not feel like this is mine. Could this somehow be related to someone else in my life? And at that moment, the telephone rang, and it was my sister, and she was calling to tell me how anxious she was. So thanks a lot. I really appreciated that.
Well, you've gotten me back. That's
yeah.
for sure.
So something else that people ask us a lot is they want to know, well, have you done all the same things in your life? Have you spent all your time together? And I thought we could talk about that a little bit. When we were growing up, we were constantly together all the time, and it was actually really nice. I think as children, we never really had to feel lonely like sometimes I would notice our other friends did. Mm-hmm. And even now I have a 1-year-old baby, and sometimes I look at him and I just feel really sad for him because I think he's all alone. He doesn't have anyone else. So
it was really nice always having someone who saw the world like you did, who could understand what you were feeling. And I remember there would be adults who would come to us and say, hey, you can't speak for the other one. We always said we. You know, they would try to tell us, you need to say I and speak for yourself. You can't possibly know what's going on inside her head.
Actually, there were a lot of adults who were and continue to still be intimidated by us because we would stand up for each other, and we just always understood what the other person was thinking and feeling. And we were talking about the other day how we used to think that just everyone in the whole world thought like we did. So because someone else did that way, and so both of us, we've had to learn some hard lessons about how not everyone has the same perspectives as we do, and that's kind of been a big one. But something else, oh yeah, we always lived together, we did everything together, and then when we got into college, we actually shared a dorm room for about a year together. And in a lot of ways that was great because it was always easy to meet people. We were kind of the star attraction of the dormitory. But we started driving each other crazy, as you can imagine, living in this tiny space. And I remember days where I was just feeling so suffocated that I would just seek out classrooms, empty classrooms where I could just go and sit and be by myself. And I started to feel like this wasn't really working, that I needed to have some of my own space. But then I had all these fears, like I had these thoughts that, well, if Amy wasn't with me, then no one would be interested in me because I would just be really boring. Or I thought, if something ever happened to her, then I would not be able to survive at all because who would I be without her? And when I had those thoughts, I realized that I really had to do something about that. I couldn't go on living so dependent on someone else. And so at that point I decided to move out of state, and I ended up just about a year later moving to Montana and going to school there. And I don't know if you remember the letters I wrote to you. It was so difficult that first time I went to school in Montana. I didn't know anyone. The first time I got to my dorm room, see, even now I'm saying our, and I remember I was lying in bed, it was getting darker outside, and I was just feeling so scared and nervous. And suddenly I heard voices out in the hall, and a voice said to me, you have to go out in the hall and say hello. And I was just so terrified because, again, I didn't have my sister to have people, you know, be entertained by. But even though I was so terrified, I just somehow got my feet to walk across the floor and opened up the door and started talking to people. And from then on, it was really no problem.
And some people could see that as a negative about having a twin sister or brother. When we were children, when we were together, we felt like we were complete and we would be very outgoing. But if one of us were away from the other one, it was very, very difficult. We were terribly shy. I remember our mother would ask us to go ask someone in a store what time it was or for directions, and we would fight over who was going to have to go and talk to the person, and we would end up having to go together. So later on in life, it was a very good thing that we went out and did our own thing.
So during the past several years, we really haven't been together very much.
No, I've been traveling overseas for about 8 years now.
But that's probably how we get along so well now. We just see each other for short periods of time, and that's it. Well, I think what we're going to do now is take a break, because we're going to be bringing on our second surprise mystery guest of the evening. So we'll just take a quick break, and then we'll be right back.
Here comes Santa Claus, right down Santa Claus Lane. Vixen and Blitzen and all of his reindeer are pulling on the rein.
The Artisans Galleria and Indian Market and Cultural Center of Sedona are now located in the heart of Red Rock Country in the village of Oak Creek, just south of Sedona on Highway 179. No longer will you have to wait for seasonal shows or travel from shop to shop to find that special something. The Artisans Galleria and the Indian Market have brought thousands of items from hundreds of artists all together under one climate-controlled roof. You will find something for every room in the house, in every style and motif. Gifts and remembrances for you and all those special people in your life. All this and the prices are direct to you from the artists. The Artisans Galleria and Fine Shops and the Indian Market is located on the corner of Bell Rock Boulevard and Highway 179 in the village of Oak Creek. We're open 7 days a week from 10 until 6 for your shopping convenience. For the truly unique, for the best prices in town, visit the Artisans Galleria and Indian Market. We promise a delightful shopping experience.
Hi, welcome back to our show, The Psychic Explorer Adventures of the Spirit. We've been talking with my twin sister, Amy Katz, and now we have our second mystery guest of the program. Many of you may recognize him or think you recognize him from the television show The Cosmic Palette. You may also recognize him as being one of the top astrologers in Sedona. Now, a lot of you might think his name is Hazen Page, but actually his name is Hans Page. He's Hazen's twin brother. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet Hans.
Yeah, very good to be here. Yes, people don't know. Hazen has a brother from Holland, Hans. Yes. Here I am. Surprises.
The resemblance is just remarkable.
Yes, we both walk with a cane. We both don't have to comb our hair a lot. You know, we're here. I'm an astrologer too, and I can impersonate him very well. So I will step into my Hazen mentality. I will call him in.
How you're
Yes.
channeling Hazen, huh?
I'm channeling Hazen. And we're talking about all kinds of things related to time twins. I was fascinated listening to both of you.
Well, I guess we'll tell the truth now. This is actually Hazen Page.
Oh.
But we thought we would see if you'd be fooled because we are talking about twins.
Yep.
And we invited Hazen to be on our show just in case you don't get enough of him on his own show.
That's funny.
We invited him because he's been talking to us about our astrological charts and also about our names. And we thought it might be interesting for him to come on so that people could see how does astrology relate to twins and what can it tell people about twins.
Well, how about we'll start with a fact.
Okay.
There is the New York Psychiatric Institute, which has examined 27,000 cases of twins, okay, which is a lot. And they have a quote, "It is as though each twin carries a clock within him or her, which determines the illness and accidents." So there's something going on. And where you have time twins who will share the same name or who will marry husbands or wives with the same name or work in the same occupation or die in the same day. I mentioned one example that Rudolph Valentino was a famous silent movie star, and what people don't know is that he had a stand-in or an understudy by the name of Giordano Venturini, who was born in the same town and on the same day as Valentino. They looked alike and they had a similar fate. People who don't know about Rudolph Valentino, he died of an illness right at the peak of his popularity in his early 30s and all of that, and so there was a similarity between his understudy and him.
Wow.
Also, Otto Hahn and Albert Einstein were born on March 14th, 1879. Both were great physicists, looked strangely alike, and had similar fates, so it's fascinating.
Yeah. So now when you looked at our charts, we were born 4 minutes apart on February 19th, 1968, 7:09 and 7:14.
Right, so you're born very closely together. Amy had, a slight head start on you.
Yeah.
So in astrology, 4 minutes difference in time can actually make a difference in terms of a year with certain measurements or forecasting. So the difference in birth time would be one indication that maybe Amy, who has a little more of a stiller energy, okay, a little bit calmer. It doesn't mean that she doesn't have her moments, but she may get things a little bit ahead of you in some way, and then you may, if you haven't talked for a while, you may talk, and then there'll be a similarity of thought or viewpoint or interest that forms, or you may move into something that she actually does.
That's actually something that I've noticed and wondered about, how at many different times it seemed like she started to do something first, whether it was getting interested in psychic phenomenon or getting interested in theater, or she even went over to Asia to live first. And really neither of us had an interest in living in Asia, but we both ended up doing it. And I didn't consciously think, oh, Amy did this, so now I'm going to do it, but I just kind of moved into it.
It's a calling.
Oftentimes we tried not to do the same things as each other. We wanted to set out to do our own thing, and it just ended up that she would follow.
Today, for example, I thought, here, I have my own show. That's something Amy doesn't have, and now she's on it too.
But she likes it, so she may, you know, it may work the reverse way.
I think I'll have my own show.
Well, I think that there's a parallel there, and Aquarians are very much interested in people, you know, either like reaching the masses or educating them in some way, or bringing out what's unique about human nature or the human experience. I think both of you have been doing that in a little bit different way, but that you're both very much people-oriented, and probably with a compassion and a sensitivity too about their suffering and their problems, and that you're willing to make sacrifices in order to do that. I mean, you go over to Kosovo, that must have been some kind of a sacrifice on some level, even though, you know, what's really interesting, what I sometimes do with twins is that I work with their names because their charts are so close, your birth names. And so there's additional information that can come in with that. And I had a thought that just flew right out my mind in terms of really talking or distinguishing the differences between people and twins and all of that. So there's different ways of working with it. But let me mention one other example of twins that were born 8 minutes apart, where there's ways of really looking at the sublords of the ascendant, or what is called the lagna in Vedic astrology. And my friend showed her chart and her sister's chart to a very famous Vedic astrologer, and the astrologer looked at these sublords. One sublord was the sun, and for one person, the other was Venus. And the astrologer said that the health will be the issue for this one twin, and the other will be relationships and her love life. So even you have to go into the detail and really dig into like the sub-periods and all of that, which you can go into, and then you do come up with more distinguishing features.
Do you have any insight into what happens, like why two spirits would decide to come in together and be twins together?
Let me share one thing that might be, which I thought was very fascinating, and it was told me by my first astrology teacher, Isabel Hickey, who worked with a lot of mediums and cleared up a lot of, you know, sometimes people die and they don't want to leave, and they need help. But she said in the case of Siamese twins that what brought them together was not love, but hatred, and the working of that out. Now, I don't know if that is true or not, but in some instances, if you have an issue that is where you're never alone, you see. I mean, imagine being a Siamese twin and non-separated. There was a time when they couldn't be separated.
Oh, yeah.
So you're forced to work out.
You are forced. You have somebody in your face. You have to share. You have to cooperate. You have to talk. You have to communicate. All of that. I mean, there's surely a very deep and powerful and strange karma that is being worked out in a situation like that. And then you have people that I think are really brought together through love, and or a deep yearning for companionship or to help, or maybe even to be an example of that there's a world behind the real world, and it has to do with the telepathic or psychic communication that exists between the siblings. And it's quite common that there is psychic telepathic exchange.
Yeah, it's interesting how I have this book on twins, and it amazes me. Some twins, these two older men who are about 85 years old, they had lived together their whole lives. They had slept in the same bed their whole lives, did the same jobs. It's just, I think I would go nuts if I had to spend that much time with you.
I know I would. I had a question for you. A lot of people have remarked that it seems rather unusual that both of us would be on a spiritual path and be interested in these kinds of things, which kind of ties in with what you just said. But can you talk about what you saw in our chart that would indicate an inclination towards a spiritual path?
Oh, sure. The chart itself is divided into 12 sectors, and these are called houses. And the 9th house sector has to do with philosophy and religion or mysticism. And you have the planet of psychic ability, Neptune, in that area, okay, which means that it's very prominently placed in a psychic sign, the sign of Scorpio. Plus you have Neptune aspecting, which means it's making an angle to the ascendant degree, the rising sign degree, plus your Mercury and your Sun. So Mercury-Neptune ties in a person's chart will open them up to telepathic communication, or the need to really make sure that they're understood when they're verbalizing something. I mean, you may have had such a subliminal exchange at some point where you may not have talked, but that you needed, the challenge was to learn how to verbalize or express what you were actually experiencing, to be able to articulate it in some way. And the square, as it's called, from Neptune to Mercury and the Sun could indicate some unpleasant psychic experiences as well, that you're vulnerable, or that you're particularly open, or maybe you know, not as well protected. And so some charts, the person is not really, it's not recommended that the person really goes into that. That if you have some psychic vulnerability, the path that is the most available is to master the emotions and the feelings. Okay, rather than deal with a lot of psychic content which is really surrounding all of us most of the time, and be in reaction to that, because the psychic world is not the intuitive world, or this is the way that I felt. In other words, sometimes the information can be really great, but sometimes it can be off, because we're not always sure where that information is coming from.
Yeah.
But the intuitive channel is really something that comes from our God self and is directly connected with Source. And so I think all of us are really learning to distinguish between intuition and psychic ability.
That's what I try to tell many channelers, that especially in Sedona, there's a lot of people who channel, and sometimes people really do have to be careful because they think, oh, the spirit is talking to me, the spirit must know or have all the answers. And sometimes that spirit might be an evolved being like Christ or Buddha, but other times that spirit might be your old Uncle Fred who, you know, had an alcohol problem.
That's
and
right.
So you might not take either information just at face value from either source.
That's very interesting what you said, because I think because Debra and I have grown up so close to each other, we've been so open with each other that when we've gone to interact with other people, it's been very difficult to shut that off. We're still just naturally open, because that's like our natural state, is to be open like that.
Absolutely. So if you have that tendency, or you have that impressionability, there's what is called the robe of light affirmation, which might, can I share that?
Sure.
Okay. This is one of the things that I was taught in the event that you feel the need for psychic protection. It goes like this: I clothe myself in a robe of light composed of the love, power, and wisdom of God, not only for my own protection, but so that all who see it or come in contact with it will be drawn to God and healed. All right, so that's very powerful. Also, I was also taught by my teacher, Isabel Hickey, that the name of Jesus Christ is all powerful on the inner planes. And if you feel, and that we have the right to command the quality of the energy of our environment. And we have the right to command that if an energy or an entity is not of the light, that it return to its source and be lifted up to light. Also, that there's another affirmation that goes as follows: in the name of and through the power of Jesus Christ, I seal my magnetic aura against all intruding influences and bring down the healing power of God. And that is very important. Also, the back of the neck is a vulnerable area for people.
Oh, yeah.
And Isabel Hickey, my teacher, found that in cases where they're of epilepsy or epileptic attack, that by making the sign of the cross, the back of the neck, that you can, I don't know if this would work in all instances, but that you can bring some people out of an epileptic attack, and that what is really happening is that you have some kind of a psychic invasion taking place with that person. You know, and they need some type of intervention at that point. Now, none of this is acknowledged by traditional psychology, you know, or psychiatric, you know, process or anything like that. But there's a whole body of, but that's one reason why it's not always effective with certain people. If they're having like multiple, they feel like they have multiple personalities, something like that. This can actually be a psychic disturbance, not a psychological disturbance, even though there's an emotional counterpart to it, but an actual psychic disturbance then that can be cleared through intervention.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you mentioned both multiple personality disorder and epilepsy, because that's something that I've been discovering both in the psychic readings I've been doing and in my background with psychology and social work. And the experiences I had in my dreams when I was a lot younger, I used to have paralysis dreams every single night where I would see this dark figure coming towards me. It looked like it was holding a shiny object, and then suddenly time would pass and I would be screaming or trying to move and I couldn't, and eventually my mother took me to the doctors and they said I was having seizures in my sleep, and they treated me with some medicine. But I've always had the sense that it wasn't just something happening in my brain, it was actually some kind of entity trying to come in, and I've seen that over and over again in the readings that I've done. And even with epilepsy, my fiance is an acupuncturist, and he has treated at least a few cases of people who had very severe epilepsy. He got them off their drugs and actually stopped the seizures from happening. So, and yeah, he does the work in the back of the neck.
Right, that's a vulnerable part. So
Yeah.
these things go on, and there are such things as earthbounds, you know, people who have died but they're still attached to the material plane for one reason or another. You know, I had a friend who had an old Bel Air Chevrolet. She couldn't part with it. It was haunted by the owner, you know. It was given to her by the owner, and the owner was so attached to this car, and my friend was so sensitive that she could not let this car go.
Wow.
Okay, we have strange attachments like this, and sometimes these entities, what they're wanting is help to get over to the other side. And you can call in their angels, and there are angelic influences, or you can call into their guides in. Or what I'd like to do too is like call in their favorite, the people that they really loved in life, if you know what their names are, to help them over and to the other side and move into a golden light or however you really envision it. And they're glad to go. They don't know how to get over because they're afraid.
Yeah. And it does seem too, if we set our energy at a certain level that's very high, it makes it harder for entities or energies that aren't at that high vibration to come in. So I guess, and that's something I have to remind myself over and over again, but rather than getting scared, which the lower vibrations want you to be scared because then that drops your energy level. I remember a story one of my psychic teachers told me about. He was a guy from England, very tall, and he had been in a bank when a bank robbery occurred. All these masked robbers came in, told everyone to drop to the floor, and he was determined to not let he was having a great day, he was in a good mood, and so he decided to stay at that vibration that he was at, and he set his crown chakra at, he saw it as a bright gold color and at amusement. And he just stood there being at amusement, and the robbers robbed the bank. They laughed, everyone was screaming, but when it was all over, the video cameras showed him, this tall guy standing there, everyone else on the floor, and the police actually thought he was with the robbers, because how was it possible that the robbers didn't even see him? It was like he didn't exist in their world.
Yeah, he became invisible.
Yeah.
Do that.
So, Hazen, I'm really glad that you came. I guess it's time for us to end the show right now. But for a final thing, can you just tell us what the millennium is coming up? Is there anything astrologically that people should be aware of, or a little bit of advice? I know this is kind of a spontaneous question, but just some words of wisdom you could give any of our viewers?
Well, the main thing that's happening astrologically is the coming Jupiter-Saturn conjunction on May 5th of the year 2000. And this is something that takes place every 2,000 years. And it has to do with a certain reorganization of society in terms of its philosophy and religion, economy, business, funding, banking, all of that. So that's really important. We have this conjunction comes with a massive lineup of planets in the sign of Taurus. I'll be talking more about this on my show. But Taurus is connected with our Earth's resources, and our relationship, you know, the soil and agriculture and all of these things. So we're really keeping an eye on this, and I think the best that we could have happen is that we really have a shift where we rediscover the beauty of nature, and that we come from the earth and we are of the earth, and that we're unified with that, and really evolve into a different kind of a lifestyle where we get along better. I think this is a deep, deep yearning in our heart. The change from the 19 into the 2, I think, is a big deal, because that represents more of a cooperative feel too, and you know, but again, it has to do with the underlying plan for our planet, and I think that is going to be revealed strongly.
Well, great. Thanks a lot. So I'd just like to wrap things up by saying a few thank yous. First, I'd like to thank my hairstylist, Raymond Rodriguez of the Raymond Rodriguez Salon. And he does a wonderful job with color, with cutting hair. He has a full-service salon with people who do great manicures, pedicures. If I wasn't wearing boots right now, I'd show you my nice pedicure. And a person who does facials. And so I encourage you to give him a call at 204-5545. And then I would just like to say thank you to my yoga teachers at the Seven Center School of Yoga Arts, because I wouldn't be feeling nearly as good as I am right now if I hadn't been going to my yoga classes. So if you live here in Sedona, or if you're just passing through, they have classes at every morning around 8 o'clock, sometimes around 10:30, I believe, and then around 5:30 in the evening. And you can give them a call at 203-4400. And then there's Hazen Page, of course, who we just talked with on our show. And he's an incredible astrologist, very, very knowledgeable. And you can give him a call at 204-1905. And then, of course, if you would like a psychic reading, an excellent reading, you can give me a call at 203-9267. So I would like to thank you very much for joining us. Again, if you liked what you saw on this show or any other shows, and you would like to ensure that this show continues, then please give me a call or send in donations. There'll be numbers at the end of the show. If you're a private citizen, we welcome a donation in any amount, or we are looking for sponsors for the show. And we have some exciting possible guests coming up, so we want to make sure that we can continue our show. Thank you for being with us. Have a very Merry Christmas, a Happy Hanukkah, and a Happy New Year.